All right. Can you all hear me okay over on that side? Sound all right, Bruce? Uh, I appreciate everybody coming out. I'm Ramsey Flynn, one of the organizers that put Dangers in Plain Sight together, and this is our final one. And the bullying and school violence. We've had a great turnout at every one of them. We have it on DVD. We have it on the ASAP website. There's this one will be uploaded. And we have the Dangerous Social Media, which will be uploaded hopefully this week. So you can see myself or Melissa to get a DVD of the last ones if you'd like to watch it. Anyway, I'm Ramsey Flynn. I'm also one of the city commissioners, and I also work here at BCTC. And I just want to introduce some people that we have in case you do have questions. Some of the public, our jailer, Frank Dole, our sheriff, Burl Perdue, the mayor's here, Ed Burtner, and school board members are here. I saw them earlier. School board members. We also have our state representative, Les Yates. So it takes everybody together, to deal with a lot of these issues with the dangers in our community and the awareness and education. So, but I appreciate all them coming out and the support that we've had. So, but anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa Stoker. She works for ASAP. She's on the board with us and kind of do some introductions.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just wanted to say thank everybody for coming out. Like you said, it is the last of the series. We hope to continue this next year. We may switch up the topics just a little bit, but I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the board over here, the special thanks, because those are the people that helped to make this possible. Not only the 2 grants that we got from the Greater Clark and the Clark Community Foundation, but for a lot of individuals whose names are up on that banner. So anyway, like you said, if you visit clarkcountyasap.org, that is our website, and you'll find all kinds of information and links to the one on drugs, the one on social media, like you said, is coming up, and then this one soon. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce first John Lennon, who's with the GRCU Services Center. He'd like to say a few words, and then after that, we'll start our presentation.
Thank you. I just want to take a minute or two to kind of remind everybody about the youth service centers and family resource centers of Clark County Public Schools. Hopefully it's just a reminder. Hopefully you guys all know about it. We're in all 8 of the public schools here in Clark County, and we're here to basically do anything we can to remove any barriers that are in the way of students' education. So anything from clothes, food, school supplies, things like that. Some of us have a little bit of money for like electric bills and stuff like that. So a little bit of everything. We also put on different programs like college and career fairs, mentoring programs, born learning. We're kind of, I don't want to say catch-all, but really we are a little bit of a catch-all. We can help in many ways on our own or refer you out to all these great agencies that are in Clark County. So I just wanted to put a couple names and faces together. And also, these ladies are going to be handing out a new FRC brochure to everybody, so just kind of tells us what we're all about. So we have the FRC coordinator at the preschool is Dina Graham. Martina Hensley is at Campbell, she's here. Rick Mitchell is at Baker. Kent Kugel is at Strode, thank you. What did I say? Shear, I'm sorry. Michelle Mitchell is at Conkright. Is that everybody that's here? And then we have Roz Gay is at Strode, and Eva Miller is at Justice. I think that's everybody. So don't forget to use us if you need any help. There's a lot of help in the schools and out in the community. We can connect you with it. All right? Thank you.
Okay. Now I'd like to introduce our main speaker, Ms. Patricia Hopkins. She's with Mountain Comp Care, and she's going to be doing the presentation tonight. And following her, we'll just have a brief, maybe 10 minutes from Reverend King. So we'll just go ahead and hand this off to you. Thank you.
I'm Patricia. As she said, I am with Mountain Comprehensive Care here in town, and I also work closely with different community coalitions here in Clark County. I was not born and raised here, but I am raising my children here, and I love being here with all of you. Angela Bresnik at the health department is our community educator, and if you've had the privilege of sitting in on one of her classes, you know she's wonderful at what she does. And unfortunately, she had to be out of town due to a loss, so she asked me to fill in, and because she's exudes goodness, I could not say no. So Angela built this presentation, if you will, and then also gave me the permission to add and make changes as I saw fit. So I've tried to include some things that I think are of interest across different ages and stages, and also brought some resources to talk about. And feel free, if you have questions as we go along, just let me know, and I'm happy to share the stage. Whoops. So, in these types of events, I like to start by talking about why is it that you're here. I think often we go into these situations not knowing what we're getting ourselves into, and maybe not what the purpose of all of this is. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions of bullying. When I called my dad to chat about this opportunity that I had, we had a lengthy, really helpful conversation about why it is that I think that I should come here and do a bullying and school violence presentation tonight, because my dad, like many people, subscribes to some of the misconceptions about bullying that you see up here. My dad, for example, said to me growing up, "You need to develop a thick skin." Unfortunately, God graced me with thick bones, but not thick skin as a child. So, also, fortunately, my dad's wonderful, and he had lots of great ideas that he shared with me. And one of those things is to always be open to new ideas and learning. And so, as a product of our conversation, he learned a lot about bullying and school violence and why some of these misconceptions lead to problems in our schools and communities. Have you heard of some things other than what you see here that people say in response to conversations about bullying? Oh, yes. Ever popular, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me." What else? What about, you just need to be tough? Right? Girls, boys, the same. You just need to get tough. Tough it out. Pull up your bootstraps. That's popular, right? That actually is great advice for many things in the world, especially if you happen to be a grown-up, right? That works in a lot of different situations. For kids, though, in our schools, that's not especially helpful. And what we've learned is those kinds of misnomers really don't help to solve problems when it comes to bullying and school violence. So, you know, you're brought here thanks to all these sponsors and ASAP and wonderful people from the schools, FRCs and the school board. What's the big deal? Why would we sink so many community resources into this? Well, the reason that I think it's a big deal is because bullying doesn't just impact us when we're children. It goes with us throughout our life. In front of you have a yellow Post-it. If you would be so kind and so brave as to pick up your Post-it, and if you have thought about a bullying incident that occurred to you within the last year or so that made you uncomfortable or was hurtful, could you raise your Post-it up for me? Yeah, I mean, this survey talked to 455 adults. 60% of them reported that they still think about being bullied as a child, right? That's a pretty significant impact. I thought about it this morning when I got dressed, right? Because I care about my appearances. When I was a child, I was bullied as related to that. How did I do? Pretty good? Research also tells us that 1 out of 10 students drops out of high school because of incidents of bullying that go unaddressed or ineffectively addressed. And if you look at other research, it tells you that when you have one high school dropout in your community, it costs the community in the long term a lot of money and financial resources, etc. And the other reason that you are all here and that this really is a big deal is because when bystanders intervene, bullying stops within 10 seconds, 57% of the time. So you being present and informed because of your presence here tonight could reduce bullying by over 50%. And that's why you're here. I talked about the financial impact on the community long term if bullying goes unaddressed as related to things like high school dropouts. We also know, due to research that's been done, that many boys who were bullies in middle school had at least one criminal conviction by age 24. 40% had 3 or more convictions by age 24. And bullies were 4 times more likely as peers to have multiple convictions. We have some law enforcement agency people here tonight. Would you give your hand a raise if you think that you see this in your daily work? Do you see bullies? Yeah. It's a public health problem, and often we don't look at it that way. We think of it as a school problem. The school sometimes will say it's a home problem. We go back and forth on where to place blame, but ultimately it's a public health issue because any involvement in bullying also means or correlates to later poor mental health and physical health, other high-risk behaviors. So essentially what that's saying is if you're involved in bullying, you are more likely to be involved in other high-risk behaviors. Additionally, you're more likely to experience some mental health or physical health struggles. That comes back to the community in impact. Bullying can also have long-standing effects months or years after it occurs. And that's true for both the bully, who we learned about could drop out or have poor academic performance, missed potential, criminal convictions, and the person who has experienced mental health issues as related to bullying that occurred and was not addressed. So that's why you're here. Thank you for coming. We're also going to talk about how do we know what bullying is? What does it look like in actuality? Discuss risk and protective factors, and discuss a little bit on how to recognize and reduce bullying. So the American Psychological Association says that bullying is a form of aggressive behavior in which someone intentionally and repeatedly causes someone else harm, right? We have a variety of definitions of what bullying is. They have some commonalities, so that unwanted aggressive piece is common among those definitions, as well as the person who is the bully in the situation has some real or perceived power over others that are involved, and it's a repeated behavior over time. So as parents, teachers, community members, we sometimes are put in a position where we're unsure about whether what we are seeing or what's being reported to us is bullying or is this just kids being kids, and they're having a conflict, which is totally normal. So I've highlighted here, along with the National Bullying Prevention Center, the difference between conflict and bullying. So conflict, a lot of us experience that every day, right? disagreement, both sides are able to share their opinion freely. There's no power imbalance involved. And generally, we're able to stop and change behavior when we can recognize that we're hurting someone else. In opposition to that, bullying, there's a goal, an intention about harm. There's a power differential. And even with knowledge that you are being hurtful or hurting someone, the behavior continues. So there are different types of bullying that we can see in the community in our schools: verbal, social, physical, and cyberbullying. I think cyberbullying was mentioned in our last presentation on the dangers of social media, and if you weren't there, I encourage you to visit that and review it online. So we'll talk just a little bit about each of those types of bullying. Verbal bullying is what you would probably assume that it is. It involves spoken or written word, things like name-calling, teasing, making inappropriate sexual comments, making comments to threaten, to cause harm, homophobic, racist, or sexist remarks. So when you're listening to reports and a kid's telling you a story about someone who's repeatedly going into conflict with them, holding power over them, and causing hurt, you're listening for some of these things that would fall into those categories. Social bullying is often tied into verbal bullying. It's when we use bullying to jeopardize someone's reputation or relationship. This comes into play at a very early age. A long time ago, I ran a preschool, and I learned two things, actually probably a lot. We won't go into that. The two things we can discuss tonight are even tiny humans can be bullies, and so can grown-ups. So I'll talk a little bit tonight about how we can have workplace bullies as well. Leaving someone out on purpose, spreading rumors, embarrassing someone intentionally in public, all of those fall under that social category. Those cliques that we have in school, those are normal, right? It becomes a problem when there's intention around exclusion of others and it's done in a hurtful manner. Humiliation, embarrassment, outcasting someone. Physical bullying is probably the one we're most familiar with. We can leap to this is bullying pretty quickly if a kid tells us, I keep getting beat up in the bathroom, or every day on the playground I get hurt by this kid or that kid. Tripping, pushing, something that I didn't think about before, but it is a form of physical bullying, is breaking people's things, right? So you might hear about, well, I brought this for show and tell, and then so-and-so broke it, and he always breaks my things. That's a red flag. One of the reasons that you may have come here tonight is to talk a little bit about cyberbullying, because it is increasing exponentially with our youth. And it's bullying over digital services. So bullying that happens on cell phones, tablets, computers. It's usually a form of social media where this kind of bullying occurs: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's as hip as I get. You can probably name some others if you're in the schools with kids. And this is where there's posting or sharing of information that's humiliating or embarrassing, harmful, hurtful. And it becomes a public arena for bullying. It can occur, like I said, in a variety of social media formats. So this is from a student perspective, and I think it helps us to hear from them, their experience, and in their own words. Helps us be able to recognize it when we hear it in our schools or at home. And also helps us be able to better explain to our kids why bullying is wrong and what you can do about it, what's been effective for other kids. So one of the really good questions that my dad asked me is, why is bullying a big deal now? Like, why now is it a problem in our communities? because he hears a lot about it on TV. We all do, right? It's in the media. And I have a variety of answers. The main idea, though, is bullying, when many of us were growing up, it ended at the end of the school day. Or maybe if it was in your neighborhood, you could escape. You could go inside. You could play in a different area, right? With the presence of cyberbullying, there's little you can do to escape. Your audience is limitless. Literally, you can't even imagine how many people are seeing the bullying occur. It's humiliating. And unless you go against culture and turn off all Wi-Fi, evacuate all social media, disconnect from all your peers, you can't get away from cyberbullying. So I think that's one of the primary differences that kids are experiencing today. They can't escape it in the way that we could. You still have a yellow Post-it in front of you. If you would be so brave as to hold up the Post-it if, as a young person, a child, an adolescent, you witnessed bullying and were uncertain about what to do to stop it. So you saw bullying happen, you're a child or an adolescent, you didn't know what to do. Yeah. I know, like, my Post-it would be raised right now if I had one. And then, if I could be so bold as to ask, have you witnessed bullying as an adult that you saw happening and were uncertain about what the best response would be? Maybe you feared, if I say something right now, it's going to impact my relationship with this child or another teacher or someone else in the community. I'm going to let that slide, and hopefully I have an opportunity to come back to it later. Or I'm not sure if that's wrong or not. It's freedom of speech. So if you as an adult heard something and you weren't sure about your position and how it would impact you, if you responded and corrected the child, could you raise your Post-it? This happened to me at church recently. I volunteer for student ministry with high school kids, and I'm the new kid on the block. At least I like to call myself a kid. And one of the kids said something. It was definitely offensive, but we don't have rapport. We don't have relationship yet. So I was hesitant. Like, if I say something, am I going to be taking 3 steps back in this relationship building process, right? And if I don't, what am I doing to this other child in the room? So we get in that spot sometimes and we're unsure. So that's why a solid plan for how we're going to respond, even the language we're going to choose in those situations, is important. I'd like to talk just a minute about these cyberbullying challenges that are happening. These are games that happen online. Young people are invited to participate in these games. They're then told by an administrator, the person that's in charge of the game, to do certain things. They go from things that are relatively mild to things that are criminal. And then as the requests are agreed to, they increase the ante. They up the odds as to what they're asking young people to do. And unfortunately, children without support and oversight get involved in these games. And we've actually lost 2 children this year as a result of their engagement in this social media game where they were bullied and they took their own lives. And that's how the game ends, in violence. So I won't bore you as much as I have so far with all the numbers on this chart, but you can see where bullying happens. The answer is bullying can happen everywhere, especially where kids are not supervised. It's really common before school, when kids are just hanging out, school hasn't started yet. It's really common in the dugout. I experienced that in my introduction to Little League baseball coaching this year. It's everywhere. you know, we talk nationally about statistics a lot in these kinds of presentations. I just want to bring it home to Kentucky. So these stats are from a Kentucky Youth Risk Behavior Survey. This is where we survey students. We promise them, no, we are not going to tell your parents what you write on the survey. The school will not know your identity when you answer these questions, etc. Confidential. And what we learned that in Kentucky, middle school students, 43% reported being bullied at school. 23% reported being cyberbullied, and 37% reported being in a physical fight. It's pretty intense, right? And you may say, well, that doesn't sound like Clark County, because I didn't hear about that. We don't have that many things going on in schools. We don't have that many problems in our community. I don't know if you remember being a child, but you were probably pretty sneaky. In fact, every time I go to meet with the principal, I feel a little bit nervous that I might be getting caught about all the things I did when I was a teenager. A little power differential there. So a lot of the things that are happening, you don't know about unless you're paying close attention. For our high school students, 21% reported being bullied on property, 18% electronically bullied, and 7% in a physical fight. I think the reports on these are less for high school students because they did it in middle school and they figured out how to avoid it or decrease it by high school. But there's plenty of room to decrease the number of children that are being impacted by this. This kind of visual aid really helps me because it talks about this is where bullying can begin and this is where it ends. And similar to that social media game that resulted in the loss of life, it starts with very little abrasive contact with someone and often ends in physical abuse, property damage, or violence. So understanding that definition of bullying, unwanted, hurtful, repeated behaviors is important because it can exist in different ways. There are different examples across the continuum. Some are a lot more abrasive and damaging than others. What are the effects of bullying? I mean, the answers are on that slide, but what do you see as the effect of bullying? School avoidance, because they don't want to go to school because that's where the bullying is happening. You can't blame them, right? What happens when kids avoid school? Truancy. Their grades go down. Their grades go down. And then if it continues, they drop out. Or yeah, you're right about that. Sometimes they become the bully themselves. In addition to just school avoidance, kids can make themselves sick over bullying. The stress, the anxiety, it brings on headaches, it brings on gastrointestinal problems, muscle tension, discomfort, pain, and that keeps kids out of school. And you know, maybe you're a parent that sends their kid to school anyway. That makes the schools happy, as long as they don't have a fever and they're not vomiting. And what happens is that child, they're not really being impacted by the message that the teacher is sharing that day. They're there, but they're not there. They're in a place of fear and worry, and they're not really learning at that place. The worst effect of bullying is loss of life. And that's happening more and more. You know, that's what spurred the Agency for Substance Abuse Prevention to put together an event like this and the other events that they provided for the community this year. Also, one of the effects of bullying is self-medicating, which often looks like substance use. These are some facts on suicide. It's the second leading cause of death for youth and young adults in Kentucky. It's real. You probably know someone who's been impacted by this. 18.2% of Kentucky middle school students reported that they had seriously considered killing themselves at some point in their lives. So I was never a math scholar, but I have a lot of teachers in the room. They can check my math. That's almost 20%, so that is 1 in 5. Am I good? Yeah. 1 in 5 of our middle schoolers have contemplated suicide. And 5.8% reported having made an attempt at suicide. One of the goals that we have today is to talk about risk factors. Who is it that we can see that may be at risk as both a bully and a victim? So this is an illustration of what are the risk factors involved in both of those roles. So for the bully, impulsivity, prior victimization, maybe they were being bullied previously, as you had mentioned. Maybe they're being neglected or abused at home or in their community. Maybe they're really struggling academically, and bullying is a way to detract from that. Maybe they're using substances. Maybe they're continuing patterns of violence that really started at an early age and went unaddressed. And victims who are presenting with risk factors include kids who have some mental health issues as related to depressive symptoms, anxiety. Kids who are struggling academically often have a lower self-esteem, and so they are ripe for the picking, if you will, for bullies. They're a vulnerable population. Kids who are not very adept socially are also vulnerable. When there's a lack of supervision, your risk of bullying goes way up. Additionally, when we have bullying policies and consequences, but we don't talk about it, and we don't enforce it consistently and fairly, that presents a huge risk factor. And when we have that indifferent attitude, that promotes the same attitude in our students. So not only does bullying go unpunished, but victims become hopeless about it being different for them. So that was a downer. Let's talk about protective factors. Family, peers, and school environment play key roles in minimizing school bullying and violence. This is not a shock to anybody here tonight. That's why we come together like this. So when we do things that promote high self-esteem, when we teach social skills at an early age, are any preschool people here? I love my preschool people. Yeah. So when they work on character education, and that's carried through early elementary, that is going to decrease the likelihood that kids are victims or bullies. If we can increase parent involvement at our schools, that is a preventive factor. And promotion of social engagement and recreational activities is another preventative factor. As we mentioned earlier, you're largely here as a result of the work of ASAP. So I'd like to point out for just a moment how the risk factors for substance use addiction and bullying and being a victim of bullying fall right in line with each other. You can see risk factors, early aggressive behavior. We talked about that. Bullies continue that pattern. Poor social skills. Both the bully and the victim are not adept socially. They're missing that piece of their development. Substance use across the board. And then protective factors are things like positive relationships, those that are developed in recreational activities with adults and other peers. Parental monitoring support, parental engagement at the schools, academic success, anti-drug use policies, and strong neighborhood attachment and involvement. So if we address some of these risk factors locally, and we also pay attention and create more preventative factors locally, we're not just addressing bullying and school violence, we're decreasing the likelihood that people will be victim to bullying, and also that they will be at risk for addiction in the future. The signs that a child might be bullying others some of them are pretty evident, right? So if you're getting calls from the school about your child physically being aggressive towards others, that's definitely a dead giveaway that they're at risk of being a bully. If they're often, getting referrals to the principal, if all of a sudden they have extra money and they don't really have a good explanation for that, if they are competitive and worry about their reputation and popularity to a high degree, that kind of points to that power differential that they've established over other children. So we all do things for similar reasons. Why do people bully? To appear tough, right? To get others to like them, to hide fears and vulnerabilities themselves. If they're unhappy, if they have untreated mental health issues, if they don't like who they are as a person. I mean, you probably had people tell you if you were experiencing bullying, well, that person is jealous of you. Well, that person is intimidated because of your success or your intelligence or your empowerment. They're jealous. All those things may be true, and they're not an excuse for anyone to be a bully. Young kids are unaware of the impact they're having when they bully other kids. They don't know if we don't tell them. Also, they see that as a way of gaining power and seeking acceptance from the peers. Without parent guidance and character education in school and support and awareness in our community, we're going to see an influx and continued growth of bullying. Signs your kid is being bullied. Some of them are really evident, right? They're physical. You can see them. Others, maybe the kid's trying to hide, like a broken something that they took to school, maybe headphones, or their phone is cracked or something of that nature. Unresolvable physical complaints. So if you have a kid who's getting headaches all the time and you offer them medicine and they're saying, you know what, that medicine just doesn't work. It doesn't help my head. It doesn't help my stomach. Well, that's a red flag because that's probably going back to the anxiety that's fueling their complaint. Changes in eating habits and sleeping patterns are also red flags. This leads to things that we're all aware of. School avoidance, lack of competence in core content areas, feelings of hopelessness, decreased self-esteem, self-destructive behaviors. Sometimes we see these kids start to self-harm by cutting or other means, talking about suicide. Anyone that has a disability is part of a vulnerable population for bullying. Anyone who has learning differences or a different sexual gender identity or cultural differences are more vulnerable to bullying. And this is very common for students who are of the LGBTQ population. And they are at the greatest risk for suicide. Why don't people ask for help? Why don't you tell me? So the victim fears retaliation. That makes a lot of sense because that happens in the world, right? And then they don't want it to be worse. Yeah. What else? What keeps people from telling?
My 8-year-old dealt with this week. They don't want to be the tattletale. They don't want to be the one getting somebody else in trouble.
They don't want to be the tattletale. Yeah. What else? Yeah. That might tell others that they are weak. No one wants to be that kid, right? Anything else you can think of? Maybe they just don't want to draw additional attention to themselves. These are kids that often fly under the radar, and that's where they're comfortable. So you've talked about all of these things. something that's not in the slide there is that over half of the kids surveyed reported that when they did tell someone at school, they ignored it or they were ineffective in resolving it. So that in itself causes hopelessness. So I'd like to talk just for a minute about what we can do as parents in the community to help when we learn about bullying. You know, first we have to figure out, is it really bullying? Let's not leap to conclusions. If someone said one mean thing, let's learn more, get the facts. Trust your child. Let them know that it's not their fault. Let them know that there's something that can be done about it. It's not permanent. And that you're going to stand by them and figure it out. And you're going to work with the school. And then you're going to work with the school like you promised. While we want to believe the children and we want to help, we don't want to rush into problem solving too quickly. We don't want to make any promises that we can't keep in regards to solving the problem. Additionally, we don't want to minimize what the bully did or rationalize the bully's behavior. That's what we do when we say, oh, that person's just jealous. Or you hear this a lot too. Oh, honey, they just like you. That's why they hit you all the time. They want your attention. So that would be rationalizing the bully's behavior. We're going to move away from that. Don't rush to solve the problem. Don't tell your child to just avoid the bully. That's pretty difficult. And it doesn't solve the problem. A lot of us have a tendency to tell the kid to fight back. I'm not going to tell anybody they're wrong about that. I can tell you that it often results in disciplinary referrals at the school. There are school policies against that kind of retaliation. And there's a power differential when bullying is occurring. The kid who reports bullying is of lesser power and stature than the bully, so you might really be setting them up to get pretty hurt. And their recovery from that is going to be longer than if you solve the problem in a different way. Something else that we need to avoid as parents, as much as we might like to confront the child that's bullying or their parent, that's not the most effective way of problem solving. The school can really help you in addressing it in a way that is going to be quick and to the point. And you can avoid your name in the papers later. So if you're a kid who's being bullied, you can contact people you trust in the school, whether it's your bus driver, I love our bus drivers, or someone in the cafeteria, or a visitor like law enforcement that comes to schools and does presentations. As a parent, if you feel like assault has occurred, you can talk to a local law officer about that. You can make reports. It's important that kids keep information that produces evidence as related to bullying, so you have something to back up what has occurred. And then we have a stop tip line here in Clark County that allows people to report anonymously, so the school can be more proactive in addressing bullying in the schools. It's a great program that we offer here in Clark County. I don't know of anyone else locally who's doing that. And it gives you the opportunity to help a kid. Maybe it's not your kid that you know is being bullied, someone else, right? And we also have a cyber tip line. And I can make those available through our ASAP website as well. What can we do to help prevent bullying? Model respectful communication at home, as difficult as it might be. Model positive problem-solving skills. Encourage social involvement, like whatever your kid's interested in, go with that. When it changes, let it go. Move on to the next thing that they like. Teach tolerance. A lot of us are very different, and we're also very much the same. And if we teach kids about acceptance of that, they're less likely to bully or be bullied. Discuss the school policies on bullying with your child. Discuss that as the teacher with the class. Remind them of it periodically. This is what happens if you bully. It's not good. You're not going to have fun when we learn that you are bullying. And promote access to mental health resources. The impact of bullying can be lifelong, and it can take a life. So we need to recognize the grandiosity of that impact. And we need to connect people in our community to mental health resources. Those are available at school. We have 3 local community mental health agencies. I like Mountain Comp the best. Just kidding. I work really closely with NIAP. They're wonderful. And I also work closely with Bluegrass. Honestly, we all collaborate and work together to meet the identified needs of children. And we offer adult services as well. When your kid's being bullied and victimized in the school, that can be a real struggle for you, especially if they're dealing with some mental health symptoms as well. And we can offer support to parents who are in that position or grandparents raising grandchildren. We really want to provide wraparound services in our community to address all of those needs. There are suicide prevention resources in front of you on the tables. I also have some extra ones. Additionally, Shear Elementary, one of my favorite elementary schools, produces this handout for parents, and I'm going to make it available to you tonight. It's bullying questions and answers. So it's a great way to start a conversation with your kid to talk about these questions and answers. So this will be up front. And I also did a little Amazon shopping this weekend and picked out juvenile literature that would be helpful for teaching and learning about tolerance, empathy, and bullying response. So we have Sheila Ray the Brave. This is really good for pre-K to about 2nd grade. The Story of Ruby Bridges. This is elementary school age. This is good for elementary and middle school, and this is something that high schoolers have enjoyed reading. So you can come up and take a look. There's a ton of resources available through schools in your Family Resource Center. John Lillen brought these tonight. It's a parent's guide for an anti-bullying prevention program and how we respond to reduce bullying impact. There's also something that he has for students, so they can have that resource. I begged, borrowed, and stole to present to you tonight. These are the people I begged, borrowed, and stole from. This is not APA format or any professional format at all, but if you would like more professional references, I can provide those to you. There's just a wealth of knowledge online about how we can respond and interact in our community to reduce bullying. And I encourage you to join ASAP and our mental health task force and be part of the team that's solving those problems in Winchester. And I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
All right. Marvin King's here, Pastor Marvin King from First Baptist Church. He's going to say some words, then I'll speak after.
Once again, it's an honor and a privilege to be with you again tonight as we talk about bullying. This has been a great presentation, and I don't know about you, but these particular types of issues bring some very stark realities to memory to me. You know, I remember growing up as a kid. I'm a little bit older than most of the kids here, a few years past young and not quite enough to be real old. But bullying was very real for me. Being the size that I was always the biggest kid in the class. And there were some kids who really said some mean stuff to me. And you know, just sitting here listening to the presentation and the subtle signs of, and recognizing bullying, you know, in our community, I think we have to be very honest with ourselves about how do we build the relationships and build the environment so that people feel comfortable talking about what they are experiencing. One of the things that I think is very different from our generation, the kids now, to our generation when we grew up, is that there were avenues for us to deal with some of these issues. We had teachers that in the classroom cared, and we had teachers that built relationships. And now we don't find that teachers actually have the time to do that as much anymore. They're teaching to try to get kids to pass tests and to meet state requirements. We have students who, with peer pressure, are afraid to tell what they're going through. I don't know if you all know, but there's this stigma in our young people now about being a snitch, right? And so kids are really going through a lot of issues that they don't have that they feel like they have no outlet to tell anyone. And so I'm here tonight to, after our dialogue and after we've heard the presentation, it's a dialogue a little bit to say, what can we do differently? How can we cultivate the kind of environment in our homes, in our schools, in our churches, in our workplaces to actually have the conversations so that everyone feels safe? Because that's what it's going to take. We live in a day and time, if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of the core values that many of us were raised up with, honesty, respect, dignity, treating people with civility, that's not taught in homes anymore. And so we have to get back to implementing and talking about and discussing some of these ideals that make us who we are as people, to care about one another, to care about other people's feelings, to have empathy, right? To have compassion. Where did all of that go? Well, in the busyness of life, trying to raise families, trying to provide for our families, trying to make a living, somehow we forgot to spend time with children. Many of the children that bully in schools, many of them that I talk to, parents bring their children here who are lashing out in schools and who are some of the bullies. One thing I found out is that many of those kids are angry. You want to know why many of those kids are angry? Because no one spends time with them. They may have, and not all of them come from impoverished situations. Some of them come from middle-class families. And parents are too busy to spend time with children. So they're angry. Children feel as though, in some of the kids who feel like they don't have as much as the next kid, the peer pressure in school, right? Kids bully for various reasons. Now, not every kid that bullies is bad. Many of to me, when my experience is, it's a warning sign of something else that's going on. But I think we as adults have to spend the necessary time to get to know children and what they're going through, to have the conversation so that we can help our children grow and mature and to be productive citizens in our community. I'd like to open up some dialogue tonight. I haven't done this in the past. I've pretty much just kind of shared my thoughts and just kind of tried to encourage us. But I'd like to talk about some of the things that we can take away tonight that can make a difference. What, after this presentation, can we commit to doing differently? Or what things have been revealed to you that helps to make us more aware of the issue of bullying in our community, and how can we change it? Yes.
I think sometimes we spend more time with the bullied, the victim, than the bully. The bully just gets in trouble and
Yeah.
then becomes victimized by the system.
Yeah.
Instead of finding out why they're bullying or what's going on. Maybe there is something at home or
Yeah.
something else that we don't empathize and sympathize with the bully because you're treating somebody else poorly.
Right. Right.
You're saying, wait, why are you treating them poorly?
Right. I think that's a tremendous point. And I think we have to begin to what I call model the behavior, right? A lot of the bullies may not have had the behavior modeled before them of how to care and how to be concerned about, someone else. So I agree with you. Taking that away from here, that's a very good point. Anyone else? Yeah. I think you bring up a very interesting point. And I think that what we have to realize is that even though it may not affect us directly, issues of bullying in our schools and our community will affect us indirectly. There is a direct relationship with bullying and social deviancy and dropout rates that affects the crime rate in our community, that affects drug addictions in our community. We have to understand the connection between that. And I think sometimes it's very easy for us to say, this does not directly affect me. I don't see it around my home. I don't see it around my spheres of influence, but it does affect us. It affects our entire community. And if we can get young people, starting at young people, and to help give them a sense of self-worth and self-value and values, right? We can really affect positive change in our community. But we have to understand that it affects all of us. And we have to get back to the age-old, value of that it takes a village, a community to raise children. How many of you were raised in a community where you knew your neighbors? Right? That is over half the room. How many of you can say that you know the person that lives on the street behind you? Wow. See how much the numbers go down? Now, growing up, at least for me, I don't know if this is your story, I could be 2 or 3 streets over, and my mother knew where I was. And I knew her voice when she said, Marvin, it's time to come on, streetlights, it's time to come home. I knew that it was time to start hauling tail to get home, right? We don't live in that kind of world anymore because we don't trust each other. The world has perpetuated upon us a fear and a stigma that we stay in our bubble and we don't interact as much as we used to. And that is affecting our children. And so what I am encouraging each and every one of us to do our part. Don't stick your head in the sand. Look at the warning signs. Let's not stick children in a box or a category of social deviancy. Let's find out what ways we can make a difference. How can we help them maximize their potential? How can we help them reach their dreams and their destiny? How can we do our part? Even if that is pointing them to another resource. But how can we do our part? I don't know about you, but bullying is very real. Just this past weekend, in Lexington, Kentucky, a 6th grader hung herself because of bullying. Just this past weekend, Winburn Middle School had no one to talk to about what she was going through. And they found her, she had hung herself. It's hitting close to home. Children in our community feel that they don't have many people to talk to. So I'm encouraging us tonight, taking what we've learned tonight and the statistics that we saw about the number of kids that report bullying, that's the number of children that report bullying. It's not the number of children that are bullied. If those statistics are any indication of what our children are going through, my heart goes out to these kids and what they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. How can anyone learn, grow, or mature in an environment like that? So I'm encouraging us, let's get involved in our schools. Let's get involved in some community programs to help make a difference and build relationships. 30 minutes of your time can change a child's life. Supporting organizations and initiatives and entities that are helping to make the lives of children better can make a world of difference. Let's do our part. Amen.
All right, I want to say just a couple of words. I'm getting Melissa up here. One thing that I forgot to say earlier was I'm also an employee here at BCTC. I'm safety and security supervisor, but there's one person in this room, Bruce. Stand up, Bruce. Stand up, Bruce. Bruce is our director of BCTC, and he let us host it here at the ASAP. I'm on the ASAP board for the college, but let us have Dangers in Plain Sight here and help me get the posters and the banners. And Bruce, thanks from ASAP, from the ASAP board, and Melissa, but we appreciate it. So, and then next year we're going to get in the planning stages for next year. Be watching for the dates, and also we'll be having the DVDs and it'll be online. But I appreciate everybody coming out. It took a lot of work, 9 months of planning, and a lot of donors that are on the wall. And but anyway, I appreciate everybody coming out, and the school board and the schools. They've been a great help also. You want to say anything? No. All right. That's it. Yeah. Oh, we have some shirts in here. We have some mediums and some smalls left. So you're more than welcome to them.